Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the meeting of the Corporate Governance and Audit Committee. My name is Councillor Paul Rain. I will be chairing today's meeting. There is a fire alarm scheduled for 10:30 a.m. We will pause business until the alarm stops sounding and then continue. If it happens after that, then that's a different case entirely. Today's meeting is being streamed onto the City Council website so that the public can observe the meeting without the need to be present. So I'll just again remind officers, try and prevent yourself from using acronyms. Please try and use the full things, because this is meant to be transparent to the public. And I'm now going to invite members and officers to introduce themselves. Please remember to turn off your microphone once you've introduced yourself. We'll go in this direction about the need to be present. So I'll just again remind officers, try and
Good morning, I'm Kate Sadler and I'm the lead officer to the committee.
This is meant to be transparent to the public.
My name is John Ringworth. I'm Councillor for Kirkstone.
Please remember to turn off your microphone.
Good morning, Councillor Moran, Wycherley, Pippax and Methil Ward.
Again, remind officers, try and
Good morning, Councillor Gauss and Chaplain Ward. I'm the lead officer to the committee.
This is meant to be
Good morning, everyone. Trustwell, Councillor for Middleton and Bellaghy. Councillor for Kirkstone.
Good morning, Councillor Gower Almas from the Beeston Public Ward. Thank you.
Good morning, Marianne Paxton, Chief Officer, Strategy and Improvement.
Good morning, everyone. Trustwell.
Good morning, everyone. Leanne Cummings, Resilience Emergencies Manager.
Good
morning, Tim Rollett from the Council's Intelligence and Policy Service, and I've got responsibility for risk management and business continuity management.
Good
Morning, everybody. Rebecca Roberts, Legal Officer.
morning, Adam London, Head of Information Management Governance.
Intelligence and Policy Service, and I've got responsibility for risk management and
Good
business
morning.
continuity management.
Louise Ivans, Principal Audit Manager.
Well,
Morning, everybody. Rebecca Roberts, Legal Officer.
Hello, everybody. Louise Booth, Head of Internal Audit.
Good morning, Adam London, Head of Information Management Governance.
Morning, Jonathan Foster, Senior Audit Manager.
Morning, Mary Hasnip, Head of Finance in Corporate Financial Management.
Morning, Richard Ellis, Deputy Chief Officer, Financial Services.
Morning, everyone. Gareth Mills, Grant Thornton, External Audit.
Morning, everyone. Linda Wild, Independent Member.
Morning, Councillor Rick Downs, Otley Eden Ward.
Good morning, Jackie Shemmilt, Councillor for Horsforth Ward.
Peter Aaron, Alderley Ward.
Good morning, Billy Flynn, Councillor for Adlam Wharfdale Ward.
Good morning, Debbie Oldham. I'm the Clerk to the committee.
Thank you very much, everyone. So moving swiftly on, item agenda number 1.
Thank you, Chair. There are no appeals against the refusal of inspection of documents. Under agenda item 2, there's no exempt information. Agenda item 3, there are no late items. Under agenda item 4, could I ask members to declare any interests? And I'll take silence as there are none. Under agenda item 5, there are no apologies, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So moving on to item 6 and 7, the minutes of the last meeting.
There are a couple of matters arising from the minutes of the last meeting in relation to items 36 and 37. Briefing notes have been circulated in relation to COVID grant claims and also the procurement arrangements for supplier relief.
Thank you very much for that. So,
I'm on page 10, item 36. And I was going to ask if it's possible to have a demonstration of the cash tracing facility. It's about putting items, contacts over £500 and publishing them on the Leeds, not the website, but the sort of technical side of the council. I would like to make use of it. I'd like a demonstration of how you do it and how you get the data efficiently.
We'll take that away and see if that's possible. That's probably one for outside of the meeting to see if we can or not.
Indeed. If other people feel a similar urge, then they could do it all at once.
Yeah. So they're the matters arising that our agenda. So can I take these meetings as a correct record of the meeting held last time? I'll take silence as a yes. And are there any other further matters arising other than the ones that have been raised by Kate? No, perfect. Item agenda number 8, the annual assurance report on financial planning and management and treasury management. I think this is you, Richard.
Thank you, Chair. This is the annual report to Corporate Governance and Audit Committee to confirm that the financial management arrangements in the council are consistent with the Chief Finance Officer protocol, which is section 5K of the council's constitution. It also incorporates this year a review of the adequacy of the arrangements for treasury management, and to give assurance is that those arrangements are robust. Previously, this had been a separate report to this committee, but we're now incorporated with the financial management arrangements. So the report reviews the current arrangements for both financial management and treasury management, utilising the cycle of internal control framework, and it's structured in that way. And in each of the different categories, it provides the evidence to support compliance with the requirements. The report concludes that for both financial management and treasury management, the arrangements are consistent with the Chief Financial Officer protocol, and they're up to date and fit for purpose. However, as you can see on page 52, there are some opportunities for improvement that have been identified. The first one is relating to putting together a training package to heighten staff awareness to support compliance with the sort of key control processes in financial management arrangements, and also just to ensure compliance with the code of practice on capital and treasury management, is that we need to put on a training for both officers and members with regard to make sure they have appropriate skills and knowledge to undertake their respective roles. Equally, we need to ensure that we continue to monitor compliance with the arrangement with regard to IR 35, and equally in terms of the making sure that the requirement of the CIPFA codes of practice relating to treasury management are fully implemented and complied with. And finally, that internal audit recommendations continue to be received, tracked and implemented to review and refine the system of internal control. Thank you, Chair. If members have any questions to ask, I'm happy to take any. Thank you.
Just probably mention one quick thing I'd raise. Just in terms of the training you've mentioned for members, can we make sure we work through the chief whips and the other whips offices to make sure that members are required to attend rather than it being an optional? Bearing in mind, treasury and capital management is actually at the heart of what the council does a lot of work around. So I think that conversation needs to be had with the chief whips, if that's okay, please. John.
Ask at page 19, Chair. What was the? I can't work out what's gone wrong here. It's reporting that the loan was taken out for too much money, I think, or too large a sum for the length of the loan. I am completely baffled by what's wrong with this, and just wondered if you could shed some light on it. It's paragraph 26.
Thank you, Councillor. It relates to an investment we were making. So when we invest money with counterparties, there are a series of different credit levels, and we have different limits to how much we can invest with counterparties depending on their credit worthiness at the point in time. The credit worthiness can change from day to day. What happened in this particular case was we were making an investment with a counterparty we hadn't dealt with for quite some time. So it took several days to put in place the legal documentation in order to make the investment. At the point in time that we started that process, the credit rating of that particular entity would have allowed us to invest 15 million. On the day that we actually finalised the deal, the limit should have been 5 million. So we should only have invested 5 million. We actually invested 15 million. That was an oversight in terms of human error, and all the dealing staff have been reminded to make sure at the point in time that they actually make the deal that they double check that the credit worthiness hasn't changed. It was an investment for 3 months and the sum has been fully returned.
I must confess, I don't know what the precise duties of the counterparty are. So perhaps could you explain why we need a counterparty, what this organisation does?
Sorry, by the counterparty, I meant the people who we were investing the money with. It was, in this case, it was a big international financial institution.
Councillor Trustwell and then Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. Just a few very quick questions. Paragraph 79 on page 38 obviously talks about the number of budget holders we've got. Do we have a robust system in place where if a budget holder moves job, takes early retirement, moves out of that post to plug that gap as quickly as possible? That's the first question. Second question is just a very quick clarification on paragraph 105 on page 42. It talks about budget monitoring, financial health reports being presented monthly to directorate leadership teams, individual executive members, executive board and respective scrutiny committees. I'm not sure that there are monthly reports to scrutiny boards, and is that just kind of loose language that needs tightening up? On page 49, there's reference to the new Civica system in half a sentence, but I understand that this is causing quite a lot of problems in terms of inputting information, making payments and otherwise gumming up the system. And I just wonder whether we could have a little bit of elaboration on that. And on IR35, in terms of the work that's identified in this paragraph, how many providers of a service who have been working as contractors have actually been redesignated as employees?
Thank you, Councillor Trustwell. Picking each of the responses to the question, just in terms of budget holders, that's incumbent on the individual business partner teams to monitor that and to keep that up to date, to make sure for the scenarios you just described, if someone moves job or their responsibilities change, that access levels are appropriate to that. In addition, we also have an integrity forum, which I chair. Each month, different directorate business partner team come to us, and as part of that, we review access levels, what their access rights in terms of, is it appropriate, the levels in terms of what they can order and stuff like that. So I think with those twin controls, it's fairly robust in terms of being able to monitor that. In terms of the financial health report, I mean, they do go to executive board monthly and will go on to scrutiny. Whether they actually go every single month or whether they're tabled every month, I'd have to check. But certainly the intention is that every current financial health report that we have that goes to executive board, and they go most months, the intention is subsequently they do go to scrutiny as well. So certainly the intention is there that is taking place. In terms of IR35, I haven't got any information with me today, but I can get back to you in respect to that, Councillor Trustwell. Can you come in? Could you? Oh, sorry, can you repeat the question? This was on a housing Civica. We've got two Civica systems.
Yes, it was. The reference in the paragraph is, I think, to housing Civica. And as I say, I've had quite a lot of feedback from various sources about the problems that's causing.
Yeah, it's obviously the new system went in, I think it went in last year. And there was just a number of issues just in terms of just making sure that the system was working in the way that was intended, and particularly the particular issues that we had in finance was just connecting with just some of our subsystems and getting the information through and getting charges through. That was identified earlier. I do know that IDS have identified that as a priority, and I haven't got the up-to-date position, but I know that the connectivity between systems that we've got at the moment and Civica is progressing, and that some of the manual workarounds that we've got currently should be coming to an end very, very, very soon.
Could I ask that we have a more detailed report back on that?
Yeah, I think that would be useful, particularly anything that's causing additional infrastructure requirements is probably something we need to check up on. Councillor Flynn.
Thanks, Paul. Page 35 indicates that the revised codes of practice call for a more intensive and frequent training of those tasked with the oversight of Treasury management, but it doesn't look like it's going to be in place for at least another year or so. And I just wondered if that was a satisfactory state of affairs given the current financial situation. On page 45, given the projected gaps in the general fund this year and next, are you happy with the council's MRP policy?
Just in terms of the first question, councillor, as regards training for Treasury management, the new codes are a bit more specific in terms of what training should be in place for both officers and members. And we're just working through the details of that at the moment. And we're aiming to get the training in place in the new financial year. So hopefully before the 23-24 year starts.
In terms of the MRP policy, we take that to council each year, and it also is subject to external audit scrutiny as well as part of their annual audit. And any issues or comments they have will be incorporated into reports that come to this committee. I'm not aware there's any issues with regard to the policy we have at the moment, Councillor Flynn.
Could I, Grant Thornton, I think, are here. Could I perhaps have their view on that as well, please?
Yes, it is an area that, as Richard said, that we do look at as part of our annual audit work. We did raise, not so much in terms of the overall methodology and compliance with the requirements of the council's MRP policy, but members may recall a couple of years ago we did raise the level of MRP that was being charged, I think back in 1920, which as a proportion of your capital financing requirement was a relatively low proportion. But we are aware that the council has changed in terms of how it utilises its capital receipts in recent years. As part of that calculation has led to an increased level of MRP being charged now against the capital financing requirement. So what we typically look at is roughly a 2% of your capital financing requirement broadly equates to an asset life of 50 years. And that's sort of a benchmark that external auditors look at in the first instance. Your benchmark, your charge is now more in line with that benchmark in recent years than perhaps it was in sort of a couple of years before that. But it will remain an area of focus for external auditors going forward. And it was commented on in our VFM report that came to this committee back at the beginning of October.
Councillor Harrand.
Thank you. These are all both supplementary in a sense. I'd like to see a number of IR35 cases as well, please. The point about how many are outstanding. And back on the point about Treasury management, back on page 19 that John raised, the first sentence says, we adhere to the governance framework. Then it says, the next sentence says, further work on ensuring compliance is ongoing with full compliance sometime in 23-24. Now, are we fully compliant? If we're not, what are the gaps? There's more than just this one transaction. I understand that things like that happen. But if we are compliant in the first sentence, then we've got some more work to compliant in the second sentence. What's the difference?
Councillor, the new codes were introduced at the start of this year, and they apply from 23-24. So we are in compliance with the codes that we are required to be compliant with in the current financial year. The new codes, the main changes are to do with additional disclosures that we will have to make in, and the frequency of Treasury management reporting, as well as the training that we've already referred to. So as I think we've mentioned, that the requirement is that we're fully compliant with those in 23-24, and we're gradually working towards that. We've introduced some changes, and there are others still to introduce before the end of this year.
And we expect to be fully compliant on April the 1st, 2023. Is that implication?
That's correct, Councillor, yes.
Got it. Could I make a comment about presentation, Chair, particularly the appendix, which I found incredibly difficult to read. And I was resorting to getting a ruler and laying it on the page to try and keep on the same line and not flipping from line to line. And it struck me that if it was either in columns or it was portrait rather than landscape, it would be far. It's this thing, document you've got to read quite carefully and you've got to understand what it says. And I found it really, really hard work to deal with the very long lines. And found I joined the things together and so I think columns and newsprint obviously is lovely from that point of view. You can scan down the column very quickly, but this stuff I found really, really difficult.
We'll take the accessibility point away and see if we can improving reports is an ongoing job which will never end like a garden. So we'll take that away around accessibility. Any other questions on the specifics of the reports from members before we go to the recommendation? No. So does the committee agree the recommendation set out in the report to note the Chief Officer of Financial Services assurance that A, in the respect of both the financial management and treasury management, that appropriate systems and procedures are in place to ensure that there is sound financial management and control across the authority, and B, the arrangements set out in the Chief Finance Officer's protocol have been complied with? I will take silence as a yes unless anyone says otherwise. Okay, we'll take that as the recommendation accepted. Item number 9, counter fraud update, April to September 2022. Louise?
Thank you, Chair. This is a biannual counter fraud update for the period April to September. This report for the first time includes the work of other service areas who contribute to the counter fraud assurances within the council. Page 58 highlights the methods staff and members of the public can get in touch with the council to raise their concerns about wrongdoing. The table illustrates the 24 referrals received between April and September, split by directorate and referral type, and the pie chart below demonstrates who has made the referral as requested by members in a previous committee meeting. As at the 1st of October, there were 21 referrals being investigated. There were 23 referrals that were closed in the period, and the table shows this by directorate, referral type, and the outcomes. Pages 61 to 64 highlight the work that the tenancy fraud officers have undertaken in the period. This includes information on the new investigations that were opened and in which area of the city, how the referrals were received, and what these related to. 8 council properties were recovered in the period, which means that the properties are then available to be relet to those in need. Page 65 summarises the work of the insurance services in respect of ongoing fraud cases for both public and employer liability claims. There are currently 2 cases in recovery, totalling £12,000 with findings of fundamental dishonesty. Page 66 highlights the current work in social care, where there is 1 case of direct payment fraud which is being prepared for prosecution. The next section of the report goes through the proactive anti-fraud work, which this time includes the work of the Welfare and Benefits Service, who have commenced a proactive data matching exercise, reviewing the council tax support payments and potential undeclared earnings. To date, this has identified 660,000, which has been added back to council tax bills. The data matching that this has identified is now included in business as usual processes to ensure that any relevant changes are identified at the earliest opportunity. In terms of awareness raising, we promoted the fraud awareness training and the counter-fraud policies and key risks during World Whistleblowers Day in June. And a further communication was raised in September with a reminder of the risk of bank mandate fraud. We have regular liaison meetings with the Freedom to Speak Up Guardian and take forward any concerns that are considered to fall within the remit of the whistleblowing policy. We continue to work collaboratively with counter-fraud colleagues across the council to share ideas and promote best practice. Part of our role is to undertake a refresh of the corporate counter-fraud policies, and we have reviewed the anti-money laundering policy, which is attached from page 71 onwards. There have been very few minor updates to the policy. We completed a review against the SIT for Combating Financial Crime publication, and we liaised with the Money Laundering Awareness Officer when updating the policy. Thank you. And are there any questions?
Any questions, members? Councillor Flynn.
Thanks, Paul. As you know, I've got a particular interest in whistleblowing. On page 59, the pie chart, I think it doesn't include the number of whistleblowing referrals, but I'm assuming it's 4. Is that right? It's 3. 3, is it? Oh, that was it. Unless my eyes are going, is it the blue part of the pie chart?
Yeah, that's 7. So 7 internal members of staff.
Information on the whistleblowing sort of issues that were raised, if it's not confidential.
The issues that were raised are highlighted in the table on page 58. So that splits it down by directorate and the referral type.
Specifically whistleblowing.
Yeah, I'd need to take that offline and get back to you with the detail.
Any other questions or comments from members? Yep, Councillor Downs.
Just a very quick one on that list of where the referrals have come from that Councillor Flynn was talking to. There's 8 others. What would 8 others be? What type of things would they be? Because we've got internal, external, and anonymous. I'd just like to have an understanding of what they would be.
Yep, these are from other outside bodies such as the National Anti-Fraud Network. So we do receive referrals from them. Also other council services just seeking advice and guidance.
So some of them are external, but different external. So external there would that be members of the public?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Would it be clearer? I don't know. Would it be clearer to just put, members of the public and external?
Yep, I can do that moving forwards. Thank you.
Questions or comments from members? Just a couple of quick things from me. In terms of comparatives, are we seeing a shift in fraud? Are we seeing more fraud than we've seen before? Are we getting better at detecting fraud? And particularly within directorates themselves, obviously you're doing a lot of kind of external work from the audit and corporate governance perspective. Are anti-fraud measures being implemented on the directorate level, and what's been done to assure that if they are that they're compliant with it and being proactive around? Because I appreciate obviously a lot of folks will be on things like back mandate fraud because that's a big area, but how are we ensuring that we're being proactive in other areas within different directorates and that their arrangements are robust and in place?
Yep, thank you, Chair. We do have regular liaison meetings with other council services on an ongoing basis, and we also have regular meetings where we discuss areas such as the proactive work that they're undertaking in their directorate. We share best practice and ideas, and also the current risks within the different directorates, just to ensure that we've got a joined up approach. Also, when we are undertaking audits, all the auditors should be mindful to the fraud risks within the audits that they're looking at. And we do have an internal message facilitator that So all of the auditors, when they commence their audit, should be aware of the fraud risks, because we do have that joined up working within our team. We are also developing a fraud risk assessment for use within the directorates moving forward. So that should highlight the key fraud risks and identify any opportunities where we might need to do some proactive work.
Harrand?
I don't know if these figures, particularly on council properties, are appropriate or typical for an authority our size. Do we compare our figures with, for instance, Bradford or Sheffield? I mean, is this normal? How do we know?
I would need to liaise with colleagues in Housing Leeds regarding the figures, but it is something that we can look into and get back to you on, Councillor.
Well, it doesn't sound many, to be honest, with tens of thousands of properties we've got, but no, I'm interested in the comparison.
Councillor, I really appreciate the question. As you know, this is an area that we are developing. This is the first time we've included such detail. So any questions around this area are very valuable. I'd quite happy to have discussions with you offline if you can think of any other suggestions as well. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. And actually, benchmarking would be quite a useful exercise. We do in other parts of the council where we benchmark against comparative core cities and similar institutions. So I think that benchmarking to kind of give an idea of where we are, bearing in mind we do have quite a sizable Housing Leeds as well, council estate in terms of our own housing provision. Any other questions from members? Okay, so moving on to the recommendation then. Does the committee agree the recommendation set out in the report to A, receive the counter fraud update covering the period from April to September 2022 in Appendix A, and note the work undertaken by internal audit and other service areas during the period covered by the report, and B, endorse the anti-money laundering policy and anti-money laundering policy on page Appendix B, and that any subsequent minor changes are approved by the Chief Officer of Financial Services. I will take silence as approval. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to item number 10, annual assurance report on corporate performance arrangements. I believe this is Tim.
Yes. Good morning, everybody. This is our annual performance report covering the arrangements for performance management. As you'll notice from the report, this has been a very transitional year. We started out with our best council plan strategy, which dictated our performance arrangements and performance indicators. And during the year, we transitioned and evolved into the best city ambition. And obviously, whenever you have a new strategy introduced, it means that you have to look at your performance arrangements and also how you're going to measure whether that new strategy is on track or not. So that involved a significant review of the performance indicators, a lot of consultation with officers across the council and also elected members, particularly chairs of scrutiny boards who also review the performance management results. We have a new performance structure that includes a set of indicators that underpin the best city ambition and its three pillars. We have a set of organisational inward-facing performance indicators that measure how on track we are with things like finance and the workforce. And we also have some specially tailored indicators that scrutiny board chairs wish to have oversight of. And I'll cite things like the number of killed and seriously injured, which Councillor Trustwell is a particular has particular interest in. We still report performance results to key stakeholders across the council regularly. So that's directorate management teams, corporate leadership team, and we're intending on doing an annual performance report to executive board next year. But as with any arrangements, these are always ongoing, and as new council strategies are developed, we'll be continually reviewing how we measure performance against them. So it's been a very, very busy year for our performance arrangements. There's still more that we need to do as we start to embed the new performance indicator results and how we present them. So I'm now happy to pause there and take any questions.
Any questions or comments from members? Councillor Trustwell.
Thanks, Chair. A comment and a question. Paragraph 52 indicates what the new KPIs will include, and I think I'd like to thank Tim and his colleagues for taking on board the comments that have been made by myself and others and board members about how the KPIs should be constructed, because again, it touches on the issue of benchmarking with other core cities and neighbouring authorities, and also putting some of the KPIs in a long-term historic context so that they're much more meaningful in terms of mapping trajectories, either good, bad or indifferent. And then just one small question on page 104 relating to paragraph 65. talks about arrangements being in place for the contact centre to act as a barometer for problems the public are experiencing, and goes on to say that performance reports are made to directorate management teams and the CLT. I think that information would be useful as well to come to members in some form. And I think it probably does. From time to time, this committee has had information about complaints, of which this would be a component. And I'd like to think that the information would also go to the relevant scrutiny board.
Yes, happy to answer that that point there, Councillor Truswell. We take on board the need for historic information. The team has been working on that, and hopefully you'll see the fruits of their labours at Scrutiny Board in January. In terms of contact centre performance, we have regular meetings with key stakeholders, including internal audit, and we sort of like to sort of find out from these stakeholders whether there's any early warnings around things like performance and risk issues. And recently we identified the need to do this with the contact centre. What types of calls are coming through and what types of complaints are being made? Is that sort of backed up by performance results, or are there any other areas that we need to consider for monitoring performance? So that's a new arrangement. We've already booked in place meetings to catch up with those contact centre staff next year. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll look at how we can possibly report that information through the regular performance reports.
Just on that, as someone who used to work in a call centre for many years before I was a councillor, it's interesting that we weren't already doing that, because obviously that's a gold mine of data, and from a kind of corporate kind of governance perspective, knowing what your customer, in this case the citizens of Leeds, are complaining about obviously tells a lot about our organisation and how it works. How quickly is this going to be embedded? Because actually we get a phenomenal amount of contacts via the contact centre, and the fact that we've not been mining that data already is concerning from a governance perspective, because we're missing out on significant volumes of really fresh, really raw data about what the people of Leeds aren't happy about. So what is the timescale for getting that in place and for it being robust, and what is the arrangements and monitoring that the contact centre, and to be fair, other directorates that may be receiving complaints directly are actually feeding that intelligence into some sort of central pot so that analysis can be done?
If I can maybe come in there, Councillor Ray, I think there are probably two slightly different issues here. I think the day-to-day arrangements and the week-to-week, month-to-month in terms of between the contact centre and services are quite well embedded. So there is that more sort of, dynamic intelligence of what's going wrong and what calls are coming in. I think the additional bit that is probably better systematised now with what Tim's talking about is feeding it right through into these broader performance and risk management arrangements. So that I think it's not that it doesn't happen, I don't think, in terms of the more operational things, but it's taking a better look right the way across the system, and including with complaints as well. And I think there was a report on complaints. There was an annual report on complaints last year that would have contained all of that information. I can't remember if it came to this board or strategy and resources scrutiny.
So it just begs the question as a follow on, if they're happening on a day-to-day basis operationally between directorates, why is that, or how is that being fed up to senior leadership teams and to executive members in a way that actually helps inform the strategy of the council? So it's one thing having lots of that information, lots of day-to-day conversations. I did it when I worked in the call centre. It's a different thing when it actually informs and changes the strategy in a meaningful way, particularly in the financial situation where we're in, where actually getting ahead of issues is really critical, because actually the bottom line is they cost money when we get it wrong, and we don't have money to waste. So is there not an interim arrangement where that information can go up while the more formal structures are in place? And if it is going up, what's the feedback loop into the system? How are you making sure that elected members, for example, are aware? So if we're getting regular complaints through, we could preempt, we get lots of direct contacts. How is that information being disseminated in a way that actually is informative to the structure of the decision making of the council?
I think the thing I would say is it's not as systematic as it should be, and that's what will come through. But certainly strategy and resources scrutiny have done a lot of work on the contact centre, and that information has been feeding through there, including things like the cost of duplicate calls, repeat calls, where the integration between the back office and the front office isn't effective, and those kind of issues. It's maybe not as visible to this board, and we can make sure we pick that up in the annual report.
Yeah, I don't think we need the granular detail. We need to make sure that those corporate arrangements are actually functioning and doing what they're intended to do. And if there are gaps, where are those gaps in that corporate structure? Because it's not just strategy and resources that needs the information. It's all of the directorates and it's all of the scrutiny boards to make sure that we're offering appropriate challenge and scrutiny. And from this committee's point of view, the fact that we're admitting that actually a really critical, important data mine of information which informs our strategy isn't quite systematic enough is really concerning for an authority of this size, and bearing in mind the number of contacts we have, because we're actually probably costing ourselves money in the time that actually we don't. I won't labour the point anymore. I think, was it Councillor Flynn that had a question? Get gone a bit.
Thanks, Paul. It's very much linked to what Paul and the chairman have just said. On page 103, paragraph 60, and the paragraph 65 that Paul mentioned sort of earlier on, the action we seem to take is very much a reactive one rather than a proactive one. We have any number of staff surveys about how staff are feeling about this, that and the other. I've yet to see any that actually involve the public being asked about what they think about current services. There is a requirement, I think, that probably you, Tim, I would imagine, to look at whatever the proposals are in draft form to ensure that we are getting the right information or whatever. I mean, given that it takes forever to get through to the contact centre on any number of days, how do we know that actually it's whatever information we're getting off them is accurate anyway?
That's a good question, and I would need to discuss that with the members of staff from the contact centre before answering it, because I don't know enough about the process. Like I say, it's something we're just getting into now. In terms of public surveys, there are a range of other surveys and consultation engagement things, such as the budget survey. So we do get information from the public. I'm aware that some core cities do a big council survey, but there's a lot of time and cost involved in that, and it's something that maybe we need to think about in the future. But we do have the sort of wider surveys, the budget survey, travel survey, etc. So something we need to sort of take away there.
Yeah, well aware of the budget sort of doers, but my understanding of that is you get very few, if any, reactions sort of to it. And so far as consultations are concerned, without getting into too much sort of detail here, I've seen a number of consultations where the results of those consultations, so far as the public reaction to them were concerned, have not really been taken into account. I don't want to discuss that here today because there's obviously there's scrutiny board involvement as well, but it's more the fact that we have a reactive sort of approach to this rather than a proactive one. We should be going out surely far more often and asking, for instance, what do people think of the highways in this city? We all know the state of them and all the rest of it. You can't tell me that people are happy with it. All we're doing is as Paul said, mining the information that we're getting. What about the information we're not getting?
That's a good point, and we'll look at how we can be more proactive across those areas as part of the ongoing review that we have of our performance arrangements.
Any other questions?
Yeah, just to pick up, I think individual services do quite a lot of surveys. So, for example, housing, as you say, transport, other services. Again, and those would be reported through their normal routes. What we could maybe reflect on is how we pick up what that picture is as a whole in future reports, if that's helpful.
It's not, I don't think, your responsibility. It's the more strategic approach to getting this information I'm talking about, rather than getting what's already there. And I think that's a matter for individual directorates to do. all you're doing, presumably at the end of it, is collating all this information. So it's a strategic response, I think I'm after.
Just as a quick follow-up on that one, what concerns me, and again, this is from a governance perspective, is that basically each directorate seems to be doing their own thing. And actually, if you're collating information to have a strategic viewpoint of it, and then to feed it to senior leadership teams, to exec board, and you're spending a lot of time, they do it this way, they do it that way, they do it that with this, they do it that way, and then trying to put that in together into some sort of understandable format, that seems like a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of duplication, and a lot of unneeded information. So what work is happening on a corporate level to actually make sure that we're engaging in a way that's consistent and systematic across the council and its directorates, so that actually your job, when it gets to this level of actually having a big picture view to senior leadership team, isn't taking forever to get to, because actually you're trying to translate how a number of different directorates are putting that information. I appreciate each directorate and each department will have their own specific information they need, but is there actually a systematic approach to engagement across the directorates, or are you finding that there are different bits here, there and everywhere, and they're doing it their own way?
It's a bit of a mixture. There is a framework for consultation engagement. There's a small team corporately, quite very small team, but that is pretty expert on how to do consultations. They, for example, do the budget consultation and, lots of the staff survey and do also do other service consultations. What we haven't done for quite a few years is that kind of more as a whole, what do the public think about the council in the way that we used to be statutorily required to. And I think it is probably something we should consider. It's probably a resource and capacity issue as to whether or not it's affordable, but it is probably something we should have on our list to do. And the other thing I'd quite like to be better at is having a clearer timetable for what we are consulting on and when. So that we had a bit more coherence. But again, we're a big complex organisation, and that can be quite a challenge to do.
And there's been my final question on this, because again, it's just from the insurance point of view. Are you assured that the individual directorates and departments are actually consulting in a consistent way? Because I'm very mindful that the corporate consultation team is really small, so it is pretty much farm it out to the directorates and the departments and see what information they can get. Are we assured that they are consistently doing it with the methodology we would expect, in a way that is actually A, approachable to members of the public, B, approachable to elected members? Because sometimes I look at some of our consultations and the fait accompli, that's not really a consultation, and C, are actually done in a systematic way, so that actually doesn't matter where you are in the council, someone could come in with no idea and say, this is how the council does consultation, not just at a corporate level, at senior level when we do the big ones like the budget or the transport, but all the way down to the lowest levels of the council, so that there is consistency in the structure of how we consult. And if we're not doing that, why are we not doing that?
I think it would be difficult to give a categoric assurance about that, to be honest, just because of the range of services that we deliver. And, there is, exactly as you described, there is a mixture of, very strategic big city stuff right down to around individual buildings or individual cohorts of people, that I think it would take quite a significant overhead, I think, to kind of manage and be sure. I think the main thing we can do is try and share best practice. And, there's lots of groups that will talk about this, and people do know where to ring for advice in terms of things like sampling and how best to undertake that, but it would be very hard to give a categoric assurance, and I think it would take quite a lot of capacity to manage. And being truthful, it's not capacity that we've got to manage it right the way across the system. But very happy to take away and sort of try and provide a bit more of an update next time about how we do that.
I think if we can just, and I'm close to Councillor, if we can, in future reports, if we can have a little bit of focus on this. I appreciate we're not expecting you to go in and run consultations, but actually, even if we're just making sure that key message and that we're drilling home, like we do with a lot of other things around support and around governance, that they do know where they can go and get help. They do know where they can go get practice, and that we're assured that they know where they can go and get help and the best practice. Councillor Flynn.
To what you've just said, I just wanted to be included formally in our future work programme, perhaps every quarter. Updates on it, yeah.
yeah, we'll look at the schedule of that and see how we get that in without obviously it being too burdensome. But I think having eyesight over it, because it's as a council that likes to communicate, we need to make sure that we're communicating in a consistent and systematic way. Right. Any other questions on that? Any other comments? No, sorry, we consulted that one to death. There we go. Sorry, apologies. Bad joke there. So, right, moving on to the recommendation. Does the committee agree the recommendation set out in the report to receive the report and attached Appendix 1 as together providing key forms of assurance of the robustness of the authority's corporate performance management arrangements? I'll take silence as a yes. Councillor Flynn?
Subject to the points we've just made.
Yeah, subject to the points we've just made, yeah. Oh, subject to the points we've just made, we happy with that? Okay, moving. Item number 11, annual assurance report on corporate risk resilience arrangements. Tim and Leanna.
Good morning again. So this is our risk and resilience report, and this is a new term that we've used to pick up on the three interrelated areas of risk management, emergency planning and business continuity management. And rather than report them separately, we thought we'd put together a sort of a joined up report which reflects how we report to directorate management teams. There's been a lot of joint working this year between Leanne's emergency planning team and myself on the risk management and resilience arrangements, as reflected in the report. We now do a single report to each of the directorate management teams every quarter that picks up on what they need to be aware of in terms of those three interrelated areas. We've attended an awful lot of exercises, ones that we've run internally, but also ones run by the local resilience forum, which is the sort of the West Yorkshire regional body for looking after risk and resilience arrangements, which is attended by other local authorities, blue light services, etc. The reports that we've presented to the directorate management teams have been well received. People are clearly engaged with risk and resilience, and we've seen big things in the news across a whole range of aspects. We still update the corporate risk register and report that to corporate leadership team every quarter, as well as to executive board during the summer. So these arrangements, again, are sort of constantly evolving as we constantly make sure that they're up to date and reflect best practice. Leanne might want to say a few words around emergency planning, which is a new area that we've reported to this committee.
Thank you, Tim. Thanks, Chair. So as as the cover report suggests, we've made some significant changes over the last 2 years. And the teams are progressing well, Tim's team and my team, with a more joined up approach across risk and resilience. Appendix 1 of the report focuses on emergency planning, more on the altered approach that we've taken over the last 2 years. And that's to just cover those. The emergency handbook that we used to have, we've moved to a more Teams-based system. So that's electronically available to all. A more frequent reporting, as Tim's touched on, through directorates and other forums, and a robust approach to training schedule, so that we've got that embedded knowledge and awareness across the council. And then the report concludes that our practices are fit for purpose, and we do operate within the legislation that we work within. But we have identified a couple of areas for improvement, such as a joint business continuity and emergency planning strategy and policy that we're working on at the moment. Thank you.
Any questions or comments, Councillor Flynn?
Yes, thanks very much. It's about emergency planning. I don't think we need any reminders about what happened at Manchester Arena. And there had been a liaison meeting very shortly before that explosion took place. Almost invariably, after any kind of an emergency, there are issues around poor communications between all of the various sort of agencies involved. And I appreciate we're just the council, and there's three other full emergency sort of services. I just wanted to be assured that you're happy that whatever arrangements are in place at the moment regarding a terrorist incident or something along those lines are in keeping with what should happen rather than what we think should happen, particularly with regards to communications between all of the various bodies involved. And I'd like an absolute assurance on that, if not today, then subsequently.
Thank you, Councillor. Yes, there's been a number of reports and exercises that happened after that incident, namely the Kerslake report, and a number of actions that were highlighted through that report that has been looked at across all of those Category 1 responders under the Civil Contingencies Act in West Yorkshire. We've had high-level exercises, gold-level exercises around a marauding terrorist attack, and not that long ago, in the summer of this year, we had an exercise that focused on Leeds Arena, exercising that exact thing. We have the Teams channel that has our suite of emergency plans and contact information for both internal and external stakeholders, with a role to play in emergency response and management. And that's tested for accuracy and validity. We're currently doing a call out exercise for testing those contact numbers that are listed in them. Anything you want to add? Yeah.
Just to add, I sit on the West Yorkshire Resilience Forum, which is where all the Category 1 responders and indeed Category 2 responders sit. And just last week we had a no notice exercise call out. So, we get a text message and an email to say we're having a no, it is an exercise, but a no notice call out, 9:15, jump on the call. This one was simulated to do with power outage, because obviously that's topical at the moment. Our systems all worked internally in terms of I was able to join the call, no problem. I was able to get advice from the team if I needed it, and everybody was on that call, well, particularly police, fire, health, ourselves, Yorkshire Ambulance, the power companies, etc. So I feel I can give a quite a live assurance that if something happens, then those arrangements do kick in. Well, I think just to add to that, within the city, we do have quite good relationships, or very good relationships with senior colleagues, particularly across kind of fire, police, health. And we have an informal approach, I guess, that complements the very formal approach, with, just those arrangements where people will just ring, the police would ring us, to make sure that we know there's something happening in the city.
So I wasn't expecting you to give it an absolute assurance today. It's not your responsibility to do, but I wondered if there was an incident, who actually is in charge of that incident? Who would it go to in the first instance?
In the first instance, it would go through to the emergency planning officer on call in Leanne's team. And we always have a member of corporate leadership team. There's always a director on call 24/7 every day of the week. And the emergency planning officer would make a judgment about the nature of that call. Is it going to be a major incident? If so, who would be in touch with the CLT director on call. If it was something major, to be honest, things would happen faster than that. I'd be involved and Tom would be involved, and we'd be calling a gold meeting straight away, either single agency or multi-agency, very much depending on the nature of the incident. So if it was a terror attack, it would be police led. Something more, as with COVID, we led that. So those multi-agency arrangements exist, but that's where the call would go to. That's what happens. And those numbers are all in people's calendars and diaries, so that we are as ready as we can be.
Just a really quick question. So I guess talking about feedback loops, because obviously if there's a major incident, you're dealing with it then. What is the process of feedback? So say a new vulnerability is identified for which you have to create an emergency plan and a resilience plan. How does that then feed back through into the decision making of the council post-emergency or post-risk being identified, to then actually start to systematically see if we can build out some of those vulnerabilities and build in resilience? Is there that feedback loop into the system to try and help inform some of those more strategic decisions?
Yes, I would say there is, and that is probably described a little bit in the report, but just to bring it to life a bit, there's a whole set of national risk assessment, an NRA, a big thing that happens at a government level that's constantly, periodically updated with what those risks are. There's one of those at a West Yorkshire level. We're very involved in that, informing from a local perspective as well. So probably power outages is maybe the best example at the moment, where you know, then that's been linking into what our business continuity plans are. You know, so a real good example is, as Leanne's just said, we've got everything on a Teams channel, which is good. But then if there's a power outage, you know, you've kind of got to then test your resilience to make sure that you've still got business continuity with that, and also feeding into things like the work that Polly leads on energy, use of energy and energy reduction, and how you can spread your risk, that kind of thing. So it's quite a live, dynamic feedback loop that's in there, and I think it probably does get reported through this approach that you've got here, if that makes sense.
And just one final quick question. I suppose it's you might call it wargaming. So something systematically does happen. Let's say the power goes out. How far down does the exercise go, as it were, to make sure the business continuity works? Do we just do it at senior leadership level? Do we do it like down to middle? Do we do it all the way down to, so for example, do we do an emergency situation kind of trial, say with a contact center, and we trial the contact center going down and how they would respond and stuff like that? How far does that go down so that actually frontline staff are as prepared as middle and senior management?
It's probably a mixed bag, and COVID has impacted on the nature of that exercising and training. There's no doubt. We used to do much more in-person exercising, you know, like, you know, we've done flooding and other things, for example, in the banqueting hall, where we've had lots of officers from all grades attending to test that. But locally, we do expect people to test their business continuity arrangements, because we can't test those because they are by nature local and need to work for that particular service area. I mean, there's one coming up next week on severe weather. I think it's in the banqueting suite, that's, you know, quite major and involves a lot of people to make sure that whatever happens in relation to severe weather, people are as ready as they possibly can be.
One final quick follow on. Bearing in mind, elected members tend to, when anything goes wrong, they tend to get residents on the phone. At what point is that also tested with elected members and their readiness to engage in that process and make sure they direct to the right people, provide the right information and do the right thing at the right time? Because I think probably all elected members will know anything goes wrong in their ward, some people will go to the right channel, some people will come to us, and actually, are we being supported and trained to be prepared for those rather than just exec board members? So what about councillors lower down the scale, as it were?
I'd like to do more. The last time we did an emergency planning member seminar, which was before COVID, I think probably about 2019, I think we had 6 or 7 people attend. It was in here. So, you know, if anything you can do to promote that, we'd absolutely love to get all members. You know, we try through the member updates to, you know, push information, for example, about flooding, or, you know, the emergency, the out of hours numbers, and, you know, we've put information in there about power outages, and but yeah, we would love for it to be more prominent in people's minds, not just when an incident happens.
I think one of those things we'll maybe pick up in member development, and very much like with the financial one, work with the group whips to make sure it's Louis, yeah, sorry, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Down.
Thank you, Chair. Just to add something there, I'm working with member services to get the emergency planning and resilience training on the new member induction for next year. So that will be something to look forward to.
I think probably a refresher for members, but as I said, I think we need to work through the group whips, because it's not a small issue. If there's an emergency, elected members are sometimes the first people the public contact. Councillor Down.
Well, funnily enough, that was one of the things I was just about to say, that upon election or re-election, I think that is something fundamental to a councillor's role, that they are fully inducted into the emergency process. And that's something I was about to say, can we sort of find some way of doing that? Because you know, there are times when, like, if a river's flooding, well, who do you contact? We've got residents saying my basement's flooded, where do we ring, who do we contact? And it may be something that although it's the start of an outbreak or an emergency issue, that you're not currently aware of because of the localized nature of it. So that was one thing, so it's good to hear, and I would support that. You were saying about when you were looking at resilience going down through other departments and that you can't control that, but are the processes in place for them to follow? And do you review those processes? I think is important. So even if you're not doing them yourself, and I'm getting some nods, so I'll take that as a yes. So that's good. You don't need to answer that. There was one other question, which I don't think I'm going to remember now. So if I remember it in the next few seconds, I'll ask it. If not, that's fine. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Illingworth and then yourself.
Chair, this discussion we just had a few seconds ago, I asked recently if the authority had access to radiation monitors, for example. It didn't seem to get a very satisfactory answer. I get the impression the answer is no. And in the light of recent events in Ukraine and so forth, seems to me having a decent issue of radiation monitors might be quite a sensible thing to do. And likewise, supplies of clean fresh water and tinned food. I don't want to raise alarm, but in fact, obviously it's been in the news. It isn't a ridiculous remote possibility, and I'd like some assurance that we are in fact prepared for that kind of disaster.
If you want to take on nuclear war.
Thank you, Councillor. I do recall the query that you asked of the team with regard to radiation monitors, and we're correct, we don't have radiation monitors, but with regard to clean and fresh drinking water and tinned food and access to those, we have warning and informing information available on the internet to residents and people of Leeds to prepare a household emergency plan looking at how you would access clean, fresh drinking water, how to heat tinned food, alternatives and other such things like that. So that does come under the duty, under the Act for warning and informing of the public.
Thank you. So I'm really pleased to hear you talking about power outages, because that's one of the things I wanted to bring up today, if that's okay. And from a risk management, resilience and business continuity perspective, and it touches on some of the points that you were making about heat, fresh water, subject close to my heart, and tinned food, for example. Since COVID, and we've had colleagues working from home, and they will need to test their individual resilience should a power outage occur in their area. I'm assuming, but I might be assuming wrongly, that you've got that in your resilience plans, in your business continuity plans. And to the point someone said earlier, I fully appreciate as a central system, it's difficult for you to provide assurance that individuals working at home level are doing all of what you would expect them to do. But is there something that you can collate centrally to get your assurance and then satisfy us that that you are doing a second line check? Are you, and asking people to confirm to yourselves that departments have put all these things in place? Because these, it's another COVID, isn't it? It's something that we don't expect to happen. But if it does, and if it does, it's not going to happen very often, but if it does, it could have a big impact, particularly where we've got people working from home.
Thank you, Councillor. We are doing a piece of work with the West Yorkshire Resilience Forum, and as you know, the power outage is hot on the press at the moment, and power outages have been an area that have been identified within business continuity plans for quite some time. But this new rotor load disconnection kind of power outage scenario that we're looking at recently, there's been some guidance produced from central government, and that's been rolled down through the West Yorkshire Resilience Forum, and we are working on a West Yorkshire based plan at the moment, which will then be helping form the Leeds local level plan. But to preempt the work that we'll need to do within business continuity plans, we have started work with business continuity plan owners of the 84, we've got 84 critical services within the local authority. So we're asking them to look at what postcode areas they've got affected with people working from home, what area they're in, what measures that they can put in place. Would they be coming into an office? Would they stay at home? We're working with our colleagues within HR to build a policy around flexi time or staffing time and that kind of thing. And we've been doing some exercises as well just last week, and actually tomorrow we've got another exercise with home care providers. So we're working already within the directorates that have the need to put measures in place for this particular type of risk. Anything you want to add, Tim?
Just to add to what Leanne's been saying, yes, lots of work with the local resilience forum. In fact, we're all getting together on Wednesday this week to progress that work on how the regional power outage plan would work. But also the workshop that we delivered last week was with adult social care, home care providers, and we've initial feedback from that was really positive, you know, getting them to update their business continuity plans. There's a whole load of things that you don't really think about until you collectively get together and start talking about it. And the one that we have tomorrow is on, the one that was last week was care home providers. The one that we've got scheduled for tomorrow is on home care, so a slightly different aspect. We will be sending out feedback surveys to the people that attended, so we're interested in finding out how they found it, but anecdotally the feedback has been quite positive so far.
Thank you, Chair. I think one of the biggest challenges we have in terms of risk management is around the budget and our ongoing lack of resource, which obviously in terms of claims leaves us greater exposed, delays in work being completed, kind of impact on property damage claims, injury health claims. So I was just wondering, with this in mind, obviously we're probably open to more claims going forward. Is the work being done to actually risk assess, as well as in terms of work programmes to prioritise those where there is greater exposure and risk to us as an authority? And are we also looking at our third-party providers in terms of their actions and their risk management in terms of claims? Do we have more control over those to reduce our exposure as a council, whether in terms of our claim reserves, which then again impacts on budget and the money we have, you know, that could be used elsewhere rather than on claims? Thank you.
Oh.
Is that particularly about insurance? Yeah, because it might be better for other colleagues to answer if it is. I don't know whether it's Richard or Louise, probably on, you know, the
yeah, I think it's just terms in general exposure, because there's obviously an amount of money that's put to one side for claims against the council. And if that's getting bigger and bigger, that means that's less money to spend elsewhere. So it's just kind of really sort of knuckling down on what we can in terms of our exposure to risk and claims against the authority.
If not, we can pick it up as an action and come back to you, I think is perhaps the best thing.
Yeah, I think that would be useful, because I think if I'm kind of getting to the question, it basically is the ever expanding list of risks, therefore putting financial risk at the council, and how is that managed from an auditing perspective, a treasury perspective, a capital perspective, and how do you feed into that? So I think, yeah, if we do a briefing note and bring it back about how your risks that you're reporting are then impacting on the bottom line of the council and what it needs to do to cover those risks.
Yeah, I'm more confident in terms of the financial risk more broadly. I think we've documented those really well, and that the insurance one, I'm less confident to answer myself. I know there are really good links, but I couldn't tell you what has been, you know, whether any additional allowance has been made, but if we can come back to you.
Just as a really quick follow on that from a risk perspective, are we banking for known unknowns and unknown unknowns, in the sense of actually you've got your risk of what you think is going to happen, but actually do you actually have an additional pot of risk, which is we have no idea what's about to happen and we might need some cash there just in case, but I'll let finance colleagues come back with that known unknowns and unknown unknowns.
From a risk perspective, I think because we've got the national risk assessment, as many unknown unknowns probably are in there, because, you know, that is a governmental level, you know, it's all password protected, you can't get into it and that kind of thing. So from that perspective, and I guess the answer around the money would be our reserves and contingency.
You're right. There is, in terms of both the general fund account and the housing revenue account, we do make an assessment preparation of the accounts in terms of any contingency you need to provide or put any specific provision. And part of the process we have in place, which has been sort of detailed in sort of the arrangements I've outlined today, is to consider them on a regular basis. So, for instance, it goes sort of our integrity forum, an internal one on a sort of quarterly basis, and obviously at year end, we review that position again. That will be considered by our external auditors as well. In terms of insurance, I don't feel fully qualified to comment on that. In terms of what their processes are to deal with unknowns and knowns and how that's sort of feeding through, but I think it would be useful if we produced a sort of note to members in respect of that. Thank you.
That might be helpful. Councillor Down, sorry, I know you've been waiting a while. Thank you.
No, that's fine. Actually, the bulk of the other bit I was going to ask was the bit that you asked there, and it was about home working, because obviously we see a lot more home working. I'm assuming, and I'm sure you'll confirm that the main team are actually based somewhere, sort of like in a safe house, where there's a guaranteed electricity supply with sort of generator backup. And I was also reassured when you were saying about the contacts were the person on duty, not a specific person, because obviously if somebody's out running or something, may not be contactable. So there's like a hub where it all takes place. And is there anything that takes place outside of that hub, like for home working? And what, if there is, how is that dealt with for things like emergencies, power and things like that?
Thank you, Councillor. The Resilience Emergencies team do predominantly still homework, rotating, coming into an office space on a regular basis throughout the week. But we do have a nominated building that we would report to if we had a large-scale major emergency that had been declared, and there is enough space within there for all of the directorates to be represented with their liaison officers from those directorates. We can also report to police strategic coordinating centres, and they're predominantly police headquarters. So they are obviously out of Leeds, both of the larger buildings, one's in Bradford and one's in Wakefield. And we are doing a piece of work at the moment to nominate and identify other generator backup buildings that we can go to. So we're not strictly only reporting to that one centre that we've got in the town hall, and we can go to other sites, and we're working with facilities management at the moment to identify a list of them that we can pick from. Obviously, if there's incidents that happen, those could impact where we report to and where we work from. So having a pool of buildings that we can go to would be more resilient.
That was actually my supplementary to say that, if you've just got the one hub, what happens if that hub is attacked or whatever, or if the public are aware of it and they decide there's a terrorist group that take out that hub, what happens? And of course, if you've got all your staff in that one hub, what happens? Who then takes over from the secondary place? And if you've got people, I'm talking about a really sort of catastrophic series of events where you've had an attack, the mobile phone networks are down or something like that, or the power's been taken out of the city. How do you respond to that? Or is that just too catastrophic to be able to respond to?
We have thought about all of those different types of options that would come into play. Resilient telecommunications is one aspect that we have identified. We've got the use of airwave radios within West Yorkshire Police that our officers are trained on using. We did have a satellite phone, but we haven't anymore. But we can report to West Yorkshire Police. I do want to. Yes, go on then. But we can report into the West Yorkshire Police headquarters, and we've got the use of their satellite phones, which are maintained. They're used on a more regular basis. The cost impact obviously is then absorbed better within that authority because of the frequency of use. There are groups within the West Yorkshire Resilience Forum identified. So we've got a resilient telecommunications group. We've got all of those risk areas, a group tasked with looking at the plans that they need to write, mitigation measures that need to be thought about, work programs that need to be put in place to ensure that we've got that robustness built into business as usual and then emergency management response.
Any other questions or comments from members? Okay, moving on to the recommendation then. Do the committee agree with the recommendation set out in the report to receive the annual report on the council's risk and resilience arrangements and note assurances in support of their next annual governance statement? I'll take silence as a yes. Moving on then, item number 13, work programme.
The work programme is attached to the final report. It's, as members have seen it previously, with a couple of amendments. One is that the IDS governance report, which was due at this meeting, has been deferred across to the February meeting. And the second is the removal of the traditional customer contact and satisfaction report, noting that actually that information is better contained within the performance report. And I think the discussion that's been held this morning has helped to secure that opinion, and the questions that members may have in terms of the performance of the actual arrangements for customer contact are better dealt with at scrutiny. And as members are aware, the Strategy and Resources Scrutiny Board are dealing with those issues.
Any questions or comments? No. So going on to the recommendation, does the committee agree with the recommendation set out in the report to consider and approve the work programme and meeting dates at Appendix A? I'll take silence as a yes. And so the final item, the next meeting is planned to take place at 10 a.m. on Monday, the 6th of February, 2023. Have a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you, everyone.